On the morning of June 17, 2018, in the quiet suburb of Lakewood, Colorado, the body of 37-year-old James Mitchell was discovered in his apartment. The blinds were drawn, the door was unlocked, and James was lying face down on his living room floor. Police responded to a 911 call from a neighbor who reported hearing a loud thud the previous night, followed by complete silence. What first appeared to be a natural death quickly transformed into something far more sinister. Someone had wanted James Mitchell dead. But who? As investigators began piecing together the final days of James's life, they uncovered a shocking web of betrayal stretching back months, perhaps years, involving James, his brother Robert, and Robert's wife, Sarah. What emerged was a story of deception so profound it would rock the foundations of an entire family. Detective Mark Salazar, the lead investigator assigned to the case, noted in his report that in all his years investigating homicides, he had never seen a case with so many layers. Every time they thought they had reached the bottom, another level would reveal itself. The Mitchell brothers had grown up just outside of Denver. Only 18 months apart, James and Robert had been close as children but drifted apart in their adult years. Robert, the elder brother, had followed a conventional path: college, marriage to his high school sweetheart Sarah, a steady job in finance, and a home in the suburbs. James had taken a different route. After dropping out of college, he moved between jobs, relationships, and apartments, never quite finding his footing. 3 years before his death, James had moved back to the Denver area after a stint in San Francisco. It was then that he reconnected with his brother Robert and, fatefully, with Sarah. The investigation began as a routine canvass of James's building. Neighbors described him as quiet and mostly keeping to himself. He had few visitors, with one notable exception: a woman in her mid-30s who would visit during weekday afternoons, typically staying for about 2 hours before leaving. The description matched Sarah Mitchell. Investigators found James's phone on his nightstand. The device was unlocked, and a quick scan revealed hundreds of text messages between James and Sarah dating back approximately 8 months. The messages painted a clear picture. James and Sarah had been having an affair. Detective Salazar's case notes indicated that they found messages where James and Sarah coordinated meeting times, made sure Robert wouldn't be home, and discussed their feelings for each other. It was a fully developed relationship, not just a physical affair. But the text messages also revealed a disturbing development from 2 weeks before James's death. Sarah had sent a series of increasingly frantic messages that read the following: "I just got the results. How could you do this to me? You knew and you didn't tell me. You knew. Robert is going to find out. Everything is going to fall apart." The lab results Sarah referenced were from her doctor's appointment. Sarah Mitchell had tested positive for HIV. Public health records confirmed what investigators already suspected. James Mitchell had been diagnosed with HIV 3 years earlier in San Francisco. He had been prescribed antiretroviral medication but had stopped filling his prescriptions shortly after moving back to Colorado. Medical experts consulted by the investigation team concluded that James likely knew his status when the affair began. Detective Salazar noted in his report that at this point they had a possible motive, but they still needed to connect Robert to the crime scene. Security camera footage from James's apartment building showed Robert Mitchell entering through the main door at 9:47 p.m. on the night of June 15, 2 days before James's body was discovered. The footage showed Robert leaving 32 minutes later. His face was partially obscured by a baseball cap, but his distinctive walk and build were recognizable. When questioned by police, Robert Mitchell initially denied having seen his brother in the days before his death. When presented with the security footage, he amended his statement, claiming he had stopped by to discuss a family matter but found James in good health when he left. Detective Salazar's assessment was that Robert's story didn't add up, and he wasn't a convincing liar. The investigation took a decisive turn when forensic technicians found traces of Robert's DNA under James's fingernails, indicating a physical struggle. Additionally, fibers from Robert's jacket were found on the floor near James's body. 48 hours after James's body was discovered, Robert Mitchell was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. But the story that would emerge during the investigation and subsequent trial was far more complex than a simple case of brotherly betrayal. It was a tragedy years in the making, with multiple victims and no true winners. To understand what really happened between the Mitchell brothers, investigators needed to look deeper into their shared history and the woman caught between them. Sarah and Robert Mitchell had married young, high school sweethearts who wed shortly after graduation. They had built what appeared to be a stable, if somewhat conventional, life together. They owned a modest home in a good school district despite not having children of their own. Robert had risen through the ranks at a local investment firm, while Sarah worked as an elementary school administrator. Diane Levinson, a close friend of Sarah's who was interviewed by investigators, stated that on paper they were the perfect couple, but she always sensed something was missing for Sarah. She had wanted children, but Robert kept postponing the conversation. The marriage had hit a rough patch around the time James returned to Colorado. Robert was working longer hours, often coming home late or traveling for business. Sarah later told investigators she felt increasingly isolated and unappreciated. When James re-entered their lives, he brought with him a charisma and spontaneity that had been missing from Sarah's daily routine. According to text messages recovered from both their phones, what began as innocent catch-up lunches gradually evolved into something more intimate. One text message from Sarah to James read, "I've never felt this alive. When I'm with you, I remember who I used to be before life became so predictable." For his part, James seemed equally invested in the relationship, though investigators would later question his sincerity, given what he knew and didn't disclose. Dr. Eleanor Fitch, a psychologist who consulted on the case, explained that the affair had been going on for about 7 months when Sarah received her diagnosis. The betrayal she experienced was twofold, not just the physical infidelity that might be discovered, but the life-altering medical secret that James had kept from her. Records from Sarah's physician confirmed she had no knowledge of her HIV status until a routine checkup revealed the infection. Her doctor, bound by confidentiality, could not disclose the likely source but did advise Sarah to inform any sexual partners immediately. Sarah's text messages to James grew increasingly desperate in the days following her diagnosis. "I have to tell Robert, I can't keep this secret. He's going to know it was you. We're the only ones I've been with. You've destroyed my life, our lives." James's responses were sporadic and defensive. "It's not a death sentence anymore. The meds will keep you healthy." "Maybe it wasn't even me. You don't know that for sure." "Robert doesn't need to know about us. Just say it was from something else." According to cell phone records, Sarah called Robert on June 14, asking him to come home early from work. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices from the Mitchell home that evening. Detective Salazar's case notes indicated their belief that this was when Sarah told Robert everything about the affair, about her diagnosis, and about James's prior knowledge of his HIV status. The following day, Robert Mitchell left work early, telling colleagues he had a family emergency to attend to. His cell phone pinged towers near James's apartment complex at approximately 9:30 p.m., confirming his presence in the area. What exactly transpired inside James's apartment may never be fully known. The medical examiner determined James died from asphyxiation, with the head trauma occurring either during a struggle or after death. The position of the body and evidence at the scene suggested James had been taken by surprise. Forensic technician Dwayne Holloway noted in his report that there were no signs of forced entry, which indicated James knew his attacker and willingly let them in. The apartment wasn't ransacked. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was personal. The following is a speculative reconstruction based on forensic evidence. While the investigation team believes this scenario aligns with available evidence, the exact sequence of events cannot be known with certainty. According to forensic investigators, the events of June 15, 2018, likely unfolded as follows. At approximately 9:45 p.m., Robert Mitchell arrived at his brother's apartment building. Security footage shows him entering the main entrance wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face, but his distinctive gait and build were recognizable to investigators who later reviewed the footage. The forensic team believes Robert knocked on James's door, and James, recognizing his brother, let him in without hesitation. The apartment showed no signs of forced entry, and neighbors reported no unusual noises prior to what was described as a loud thud later in the evening. Based on the arrangement of furniture and the limited signs of struggle, investigators theorized that the brothers initially sat in James's living room. The presence of 2 partially empty glasses on the coffee table suggests James may have offered Robert a drink, indicating he didn't anticipate the confrontation that would follow. There were no signs of anything added in the drink. Forensic analysts believe the conversation quickly turned hostile. Evidence suggests Robert confronted James about the affair and his HIV status. The medical examiner noted defensive wounds on James's forearms, indicating he tried to protect himself as the situation escalated. The reconstruction suggests Robert likely rose from his seat suddenly, catching James off guard. Based on spatter patterns and the position of overturned furniture, Investigators believe Robert lunged across the coffee table, knocking it aside. This would explain the scattered magazines and broken glass found at the scene. Fiber evidence and DNA analysis indicate a physical struggle followed. The location of this struggle moved from the living room toward the kitchen area, where several items were knocked from countertops. Investigators found James's DNA on the edge of the kitchen counter, suggesting he was pushed against it during the confrontation. The forensic team believes Robert eventually overpowered James, possibly pressing him against a wall or forcing him to the ground. The medical examiner's report indicated pressure was applied to James's neck for at least 2 minutes, resulting in death. The blunt force trauma to James's head appears to have occurred when he fell, striking his head against the corner of the coffee table or possibly the hardwood flooring. This injury, while serious, was not the cause of death, according to the medical examiner. After James lost consciousness, investigators believe Robert attempted to compose himself. Evidence suggests he spent several minutes in the apartment, potentially trying to clean up some signs of the struggle. Partial fingerprints matching Robert's were found on the kitchen faucet, indicating he likely washed his hands before leaving. Security camera footage shows Robert exiting the building at 10:19 p.m., approximately 32 minutes after he arrived. He appeared more hunched over and moved with less confidence than when he entered, according to body language experts who analyzed the footage. The text message Sarah later sent to her friend about Robert coming home and immediately taking a long shower aligns with this reconstruction. Forensic psychologists consulted on the case suggested this reconstruction matches typical patterns of crimes of passion, where initial confrontation escalates beyond the perpetrator's original intent. Robert's internet search history in the days before the confrontation indicates he was wrestling with his emotions, but may not have arrived with the explicit intention of taking his brother's life. When investigators searched Robert's home and vehicle, they found a crumpled note in his car with James's address written on it, along with the time, 9:30 p.m. In Robert's garage, they discovered a pair of latex gloves with traces of James's blood on them. Robert had attempted to clean the gloves, but luminol testing revealed blood residue. During his initial interrogation, Robert maintained his innocence, claiming he had gone to speak with his brother man to man but never harmed him. When presented with the forensic evidence, however, his story began to change. According to transcripts from Robert's recorded interview, he stated he just wanted to talk to his brother, to understand how he could do this to Sarah, to him, to their family. Things got heated. Robert eventually admitted to confronting James about the affair and Sarah's HIV diagnosis, but claimed James had been dismissive and even mocking about the situation. Robert stated that James laughed and said Sarah had enjoyed every minute of it, and something in him just snapped. Prosecutors charged Robert Mitchell with second-degree murder, arguing the killing was not premeditated but occurred in the heat of passion. Robert's defense team pushed for a manslaughter charge, citing the extraordinary circumstances and profound emotional distress their client had experienced. The trial of Robert Mitchell began 11 months after James's death. By then, the case had attracted significant media attention, not just for the salacious details of the affair, but also for the complex ethical and legal questions it raised. Sarah Mitchell took the stand early in the proceedings. Her testimony was measured but emotional as she recounted the evolution of her relationship with James and the devastating impact of her HIV diagnosis. In her testimony, Sarah stated she trusted James and never thought to ask about his status because it never occurred to her he would put her at risk knowingly. When asked about her husband's state of mind after learning of the affair and her diagnosis, Sarah described Robert as shocked, then hollow, then angry in a way she had never seen before. She testified that Robert kept saying his own brother did this to them, but he never threatened violence. He just went quiet after a while, which was almost more concerning. The prosecution built their case around Robert's deception in the immediate aftermath of the killing, his lies to police, his attempts to establish an alibi, and the evidence that he had tried to clean up traces of the crime. Prosecutor Helena Warrington argued this was not a momentary lapse in judgment. Mr. Mitchell made a series of deliberate choices: to confront his brother alone, to escalate that confrontation to physical violence, to end his brother's life, and then to cover up his actions. The defense team painted a different picture, portraying Robert as a man who had suffered an unimaginable betrayal. They called character witnesses who described him as even-tempered and non-violent throughout his life. They brought in experts to testify about the psychological impact of discovering both an affair and a life-threatening medical condition in the same moment. Defense attorney Martin Schwartzman told the jury that Robert Mitchell was provoked beyond what any reasonable person could be expected to endure. His actions, while tragic, occurred under a form of temporary insanity brought on by extraordinary circumstances. Perhaps the most compelling evidence came from Sarah's phone, which contained a text message she had sent to a friend the morning after Robert confronted James. "I'm worried about R. He came home last night looking empty. When I asked where he'd been, he just said fixing things and went straight to the shower. He was in there for almost an hour." The jury deliberated for 4 days before reaching a verdict: guilty of manslaughter, not murder. Robert Mitchell was sentenced to 8 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 5 years. The case left the community grappling with difficult questions. Mental health professionals noted the importance of HIV status disclosure, while legal experts debated whether existing laws adequately addressed situations where one partner knowingly exposed another to the virus. Sarah Mitchell filed for divorce during Robert's trial, but visited him regularly in prison. According to those close to the couple, she felt a complex mixture of emotions: anger at both brothers, guilt over her role in the affair, and lingering affection for the man she had built a life with. Detective Salazar reflected 2 years after the case closed that there were no heroes in this story, just people who made terrible choices and now have to live with the consequences. Sarah's health stabilized with proper treatment. She eventually moved out of state to escape the notoriety of the case and rebuilt her life away from the painful memories of Colorado. Robert Mitchell served his sentence quietly, participating in anger management and therapy programs. He declined all interview requests and, through his attorney, expressed remorse not for his brother's death, but for the pain his actions caused Sarah. The Mitchell family tragedy serves as a stark reminder of how quickly ordinary lives can unravel when betrayal, deception, and disease intersect. It raises uncomfortable questions about moral responsibility, the limits of human endurance, and the fine line between justice and vengeance. In the years since the case concluded, it has been referenced in legal discussions about crimes of passion and in public health campaigns about the importance of status disclosure. But for those involved, and for the quiet community in Lakewood, it remains primarily a cautionary tale about the devastating consequences when trust is broken beyond repair. The apartment building where James Mitchell died has since been renovated and renamed. The Mitchell family home was sold to new owners unaware of its history, and somewhere Sarah Mitchell continues her life, carrying with her both the virus and the memories of the brothers who forever altered her path. As with many complex cases, the full picture of what happened between the Mitchell brothers continued to evolve even after the trial concluded. Cold case detectives reviewing the file a year after Robert's conviction discovered several elements that had not received sufficient attention during the initial investigation. James Mitchell's financial records revealed a pattern of increasing desperation in the months before his death. His bank account showed multiple cash withdrawals that didn't align with his usual spending habits. His landlord reported that James had been late on rent twice in the 3 months before his death, something that had never happened previously. Detective Ramona Ortiz, who led the cold case review, noted that they began to wonder if there was a financial component to this case that they had missed. People in desperate financial situations sometimes make desperate choices. Further investigation uncovered that James had substantial medical debt from his HIV treatments in San Francisco. Additionally, he had recently been denied life insurance due to his HIV status. Text messages between James and a former roommate in California suggested he had been struggling to afford his medication. Detective Ortiz explained that, looking at the full picture, they developed a theory that James's failure to disclose his HIV status to Sarah might have had an economic component. If he told her, the affair would likely end. If the affair ended, he would lose access to certain comforts and stability Sarah provided. Sarah Mitchell confirmed in a follow-up interview that she had occasionally given James money for what she believed were temporary financial setbacks. She had also paid for weekend getaways and regularly brought groceries to his apartment. In her statement to investigators, Sarah noted that James always made it seem temporary, like he was just between paychecks or waiting for a client to pay him for freelance work. She never realized how systematic it was until the investigation revealed the pattern. This financial dimension added another layer to an already complex case. It suggested James's deception went beyond the affair and his HIV status. He had also been using Sarah as a source of financial stability while putting her health at risk. The cold case review also took a closer look at the timeline immediately following Sarah's HIV diagnosis. Medical records showed she had received her positive test result on June 10. Phone records indicated she confronted James via text message that same day, but she didn't tell Robert about either the affair or her diagnosis until June 14, 4 days later. Detective Ortiz noted those 4 days became very interesting to them. What was happening during that period? Why wait to tell her husband? Sarah's additional text messages from that period revealed she had been considering not telling Robert at all. In messages to a close friend, she wrote, "Maybe I should just leave, start over somewhere else without either of them. I keep thinking about what would hurt our less, knowing everything or just thinking, I fell out of love." By June 13, however, Sarah's perspective had shifted. She wrote to the same friend, "Jade isn't even sorry. He keeps making excuses, says it's not a big deal these days with the right meds, as if that makes it okay he never told me. R deserves to know the truth, about everything. I can't build a life on more lies." This progression suggested Sarah's decision to tell Robert was influenced not just by her diagnosis, but by James's callous reaction to it. This aligns with what prosecution psychologists had theorized during the trial, that James's apparent lack of remorse may have been the tipping point that sent Robert into a rage. Another overlooked element emerged when investigators re-examined Robert's work computer, which had been seized during the initial investigation but never fully analyzed. Robert had conducted extensive online searches about HIV in the days between learning of Sarah's diagnosis and confronting James. He had researched transmission rates, treatment options, life expectancy, and whether it was classified as assault to knowingly infect someone. Notably, he had also searched, "Can you forgive someone who gave your wife HIV?" and "Brothers who betray brothers in history." Forensic psychologist Dr. Kevin Murray, when consulted on these findings, noted that these searches demonstrate that Robert was wrestling with how to respond. He was educating himself about the medical aspects while also grappling with the relational betrayal. This suggests the confrontation with James wasn't impulsive. There was a period of deliberation. This deliberation period complicated the defense's narrative that Robert had acted entirely in the heat of passion. It didn't necessarily indicate premeditated murder, but it showed that Robert had several days to process his anger before confronting James. The cold case review concluded with a supplemental report acknowledging that while these additional findings added nuance to the case, they did not ultimately change the legal outcome. Robert Mitchell had been correctly convicted of manslaughter based on the evidence presented. However, the review did provide a more complete understanding of the human factors that led to the tragedy, factors that extended beyond a simple narrative of jealousy and revenge. Detective Ortiz reflected that in the end, this case was about far more than an affair. It was about deception on multiple levels, financial desperation, chronic illness, and the impossible choices people make when their lives are falling apart. Sarah Mitchell, contacted 5 years after the events, declined to be interviewed for this documentary. Through her attorney, she released a brief statement. "I have rebuilt my life and focus on my health and future. I hope others learn from our tragedy about the importance of honesty in relationships and sexual health. Beyond that, I have nothing more to add to a story that has already taken too much from too many." Robert Mitchell was released on parole after serving 6 years of his 8-year sentence. He moved to Arizona, where he lives quietly and works remotely as a data analyst. He remains under medical monitoring for potential HIV exposure, though he has tested negative consistently. The Mitchell case continues to be studied in criminal justice programs as an example of how personal betrayal, public health concerns, and criminal behavior can intersect in unexpected ways. It serves as a sobering reminder that even ordinary people in ordinary neighborhoods can be driven to extraordinary acts when trust is violated and health is threatened. For the residents of Lakewood, Colorado, the case has faded into local history, a tragedy that briefly thrust their community into the national spotlight before receding into the background. But for those directly involved, and for those who work in public health and criminal justice, the lessons remain vivid, and the questions it raised about disclosure, betrayal, and the limits of human forgiveness continue to resonate. A tech executive infected his colleague's wife with HIV after their secret relationship. He's found dead 2 days later. Crime affair. On the evening of March 12, 2019, in the affluent neighborhood of Mercer Island, Washington, 42-year-old Victor Kendall failed to return home from work. His wife, Elaine Kendall, reported him missing the following morning after he didn't answer her calls and texts. What began as a missing person case would soon unravel into one of the most complex criminal investigations in King County history. Victor Kendall was a senior executive at Prism Technologies, a mid-sized software company headquartered in Seattle. He had risen through the corporate ranks over a 15-year career, developing a reputation as a brilliant but demanding leader. His corner office overlooked Lake Washington, a tangible symbol of his success. 3 days after Victor's disappearance, a maintenance worker discovered his body in the trunk of his own Tesla, parked in the long-term section of SeaTac International Airport's parking garage. The car had been carefully wiped clean of fingerprints. The body showed signs of blunt force trauma to the head and face. The medical examiner would later determine that Victor had been dead for approximately 48 hours before being found. Detective Renee Washington of the King County Sheriff's Office was assigned as lead investigator. Her initial assessment, recorded in case files later obtained through public records requests, noted the precision with which the scene had been staged. "This wasn't a random act of violence," Detective Washington wrote in her preliminary report. "The location was chosen to suggest the victim had left town voluntarily. The killer wanted us to believe Victor Kendall had simply abandoned his life and disappeared." The investigation began with a thorough examination of Victor's personal and professional relationships. Interviews with family members revealed a man who projected success, but whose home life had grown increasingly strained. Elaine Kendall described her husband as distant in recent months, often working late and becoming secretive with his phone. "I thought he might be having an affair," Elaine told investigators, according to interview transcripts, "but I never imagined anything like this." When detectives examined Victor's office at Prism Technologies, they found it meticulously organized. His administrative assistant reported nothing unusual about his behavior on the day he disappeared. He had attended morning meetings, had lunch delivered to his office, and was scheduled for an evening strategy session with Noah Barrett, one of his direct reports. Noah Barrett, 38, was Prism's head of product development. He had worked closely with Victor for nearly 7 years. Colleagues described their relationship as professional but occasionally tense, with Noah often pushing back against Victor's more aggressive timelines and demands. When initially questioned, Noah stated he and Victor had canceled their evening meeting because Victor wasn't feeling well. According to Noah's statement, he last saw Victor around 5:30 p.m., leaving the office with his laptop bag and appearing in good health, despite his claimed illness. Security footage from the Prism building confirmed Victor left at 5:28 p.m. However, cameras also captured Noah leaving at 9:42 p.m., more than 3 hours after his usual departure time. When asked about this discrepancy, Noah claimed he had stayed late to complete a project deadline. As investigators dug deeper into Victor's personal life, they uncovered something unexpected. Medical records revealed that Victor had been diagnosed with HIV 6 years earlier while on a business trip to Boston. He had been on antiretroviral treatment and maintained an undetectable viral load most of that time. However, according to his doctor, Victor had stopped filling his prescriptions approximately 4 months before his death. Curiously, Elaine Kendall appeared unaware of her husband's diagnosis. Medical records indicated she had tested negative during routine checkups, suggesting Victor had been practicing safe sex or abstinence with his wife. The investigation took a dramatic turn when detectives examined Victor's phone records. They revealed hundreds of text messages exchanged with a number belonging to Caroline Barrett, Noah's wife. The content of these messages painted a clear picture. Victor and Caroline had been involved in an affair for at least 7 months. "We need to meet tomorrow, same place, 2:00 p.m., read a message from Victor sent 2 weeks before his disappearance. "Yes, I miss you already," Caroline had replied. But the tone of their exchanges had shifted dramatically 10 days before Victor's death. "I just got my test results. How could you do this to me?" Caroline wrote. "We need to talk in person." "It's not what you think," Victor responded. "You knew. You've been taking medication. I found the research on your laptop. You knew, and you didn't tell me." "Please, don't tell Noah. We can work through this." "Work through this? I'm HIV positive because of you. My entire life has changed forever. Noah will find out eventually when I start treatment. The meds work well. You'll be fine. Please don't ruin both our lives over this." Detective Washington immediately requested an interview with Caroline Barrett. The interview transcripts reveal a woman devastated by multiple betrayals. Caroline explained that she had met Victor at a company holiday party 3 years earlier. What began as occasional flirtation had evolved into a full-blown affair approximately 8 months before Victor's disappearance. They would meet at a hotel in Bellevue or, occasionally at her home, when Noah was traveling for work. According to Caroline, she never suspected Victor's HIV status. She had received her positive diagnosis during a routine checkup and immediately confronted Victor via text. When they met in person, He admitted he had been diagnosed years earlier, but claimed he believed medication had eliminated any risk of transmission. Caroline told investigators she ended the affair immediately but was unsure whether to tell her husband. According to her statement, she ultimately decided to confess everything to Noah 3 days before Victor disappeared. Noah was destroyed, Caroline told investigators, first by the affair, then by my diagnosis. He just kept saying he was my boss. I trusted him with our future. When questioned about Noah's whereabouts on the night of Victor's disappearance, Caroline claimed he had gone for a long drive to clear his head after their emotional discussion. She estimated he had been gone for approximately 4 hours, returning home around 11:00 p.m., appearing exhausted and withdrawn. This timeline aligned perfectly with the opportunity to intercept Victor after work, cause his death, and transport his body to the airport parking garage. Investigators obtained a warrant to search the Barrett home and vehicles. Forensic technicians found microscopic blood spatter in the trunk of Noah's SUV, despite evidence of thorough cleaning with industrial-grade products. DNA analysis would later confirm the blood belonged to Victor Kendall. Noah Barrett was arrested and charged with first-degree murder 6 days after Victor's body was discovered. As investigators continued building their case against Noah Barrett, they uncovered additional layers to the story that painted a more complex picture than initially assumed. Financial records revealed that Victor Kendall had been experiencing significant money problems despite his executive salary. He had accumulated substantial debt through a combination of risky investments, a gambling habit his wife knew nothing about, and the costs of maintaining what appeared to be a separate apartment in Bellevue, presumably used for his meetings with Caroline. Text messages recovered from Victor's cloud backup showed he had been pressuring Caroline for money in the weeks before his death. "I just need to borrow $5.00 until the bonus comes through. I'll pay you back with interest. It's the 3rd time this month. I don't have that kind of money," Caroline had responded. "You could get it from your joint account. Noah would never notice." "That's insane. I'm already living with the consequences of our mistake. I won't steal from my husband too." Detective Washington noted in her case files that this financial desperation might have contributed to Victor's decision to stop taking his medication. With each prescription costing hundreds of dollars, even with his insurance, and his finances stretched thin, he may have made the calculation to temporarily discontinue treatment. This theory was supported by searches found on Victor's laptop, including how long after stopping HIV meds before becoming infectious, and risk levels with untreated HIV. It appears Victor knowingly increased transmission risk around the same time he began asking Caroline for financial assistance, Detective Washington wrote in her assessment. This suggests a possible pattern of manipulation. Meanwhile, investigators discovered Noah Barrett had his own secrets. Anonymous tips led detectives to evidence that Noah had been developing proprietary software on his personal time, software remarkably similar to a project he had been working on for Prism Technologies. Emails recovered from Noah's accounts revealed he had been in talks with venture capitalists about leaving Prism to launch his own startup. These communications repeatedly mentioned needing to clear final obstacles before proceeding. The most recent email had been sent the morning after Victor's disappearance. Employment records showed Victor had twice blocked Noah's promotion within the company, despite recommendations from other executives. Colleagues reported Victor had specifically mentioned concerns about Noah's loyalty to Prism in management meetings. This established a secondary motive, not just personal revenge for the affair and HIV transmission, but professional advancement and financial gain that had been blocked by Victor's suspicions. The forensic investigation of the crime scene yielded additional evidence against Noah. Despite his careful cleaning of both vehicles, investigators found trace evidence linking him directly to Victor's death. Fibers matching the carpet in Noah's SUV were found on Victor's clothing. GPS data from Noah's vehicle showed it had been stationary in the Prism Technologies parking garage for 47 minutes on the evening of the disappearance. Then, traveled directly to a remote area near Lake Sammamish, before heading to SeaTac Airport, and finally returning to the Barrett residence. When confronted with this electronic evidence, Noah's story changed. He admitted to meeting Victor that evening, but claimed Victor was already injured when he arrived, the victim of an apparent mugging in the parking garage. According to this revised statement, Noah panicked and decided to hide the body rather than report the death, fearing he would be blamed due to the recent revelation of the affair. However, forensic evidence contradicted this account. Blood spatter analysis indicated the fatal blows occurred inside Noah's vehicle, not in the parking garage. Additionally, security footage showed no other individuals entering the garage during the relevant time frame. The medical examiner's report concluded Victor died from blunt force trauma, consistent with multiple strikes from a heavy object. Investigators never recovered the murder weapon, but noted that a metal vehicle jack was missing from Noah's otherwise complete emergency roadside kit. As the case progressed toward trial, investigators discovered one final twist. Caroline Barrett's medical records revealed she had already been HIV positive before beginning her affair with Victor. According to her physician's notes, Caroline had been diagnosed 3 years earlier, likely from a previous relationship. She had been on medication consistently and maintained an undetectable viral load. Her doctor had explained that this made transmission to sexual partners extremely unlikely when combined with other precautions. This revelation suggested 3 possibilities. Caroline had transmitted HIV to Victor rather than the reverse. They had both been infected independently before their relationship began, or, most troublingly for the prosecution's case, Caroline had known her status all along and fabricated or exaggerated her reaction to manipulate Noah. When confronted with these records, Caroline broke down. She admitted she had known her status throughout her relationship with Victor but had been too ashamed to tell him initially. When she discovered he was also positive, she used the situation to end the affair and gain Noah's sympathy by reversing the narrative. "I never thought Noah would actually hurt him," Caroline told investigators through tears, according to interview transcripts. "I just wanted out of the affair without losing my marriage." The trial of Noah Barrett began 14 months after Victor Kendall's death. By then, the case had captured national attention, featured on true crime shows and podcasts that dissected every detail of the love triangle, corporate rivalry, and HIV disclosure ethics. The prosecution presented a straightforward case. Noah, devastated by his wife's affair and apparent HIV infection, had lured Victor to a meeting under the pretense of discussing work. There, overcome by rage and betrayal, he had killed his boss, then meticulously attempted to cover up the crime. The defense team pursued a 2-pronged strategy. First, they emphasized Caroline's deception about her HIV status, arguing she had manipulated both men and bore moral, if not legal, responsibility for the events that unfolded. Second, they pushed for a heat of passion defense, claiming Noah had intended only to confront Victor but lost control when Victor showed no remorse for the affair or its consequences. Caroline's testimony proved challenging for both sides. She acknowledged her deception but maintained she never encouraged or expected violence. Text messages between her and Noah in the days following her fabricated diagnosis showed his increasing anger, including one message reading, "He has destroyed everything. Our future, your health, my trust. I don't know how he lives with himself." Forensic experts testified about the extensive attempts to clean the vehicles and dispose of evidence, arguing this demonstrated planning inconsistent with a crime of passion. The prosecution emphasized the 47-minute gap between when Noah's car entered the parking garage and when it left, suggesting a calculated act rather than a momentary loss of control. Tech industry witnesses described the professional rivalry between the two men, establishing the secondary motive of removing an obstacle to Noah's entrepreneurial ambitions. Venture capital emails sent the morning after Victor's disappearance took on sinister implications when juxtaposed with the timeline of events. After a 3-week trial and 4 days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. The jury forewoman later told reporters they had been convinced by the physical evidence, but were sympathetic to the extreme circumstances that led to the crime. Noah Barrett was sentenced to 18 years in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 12 years. In a victim impact statement, Elaine Kendall addressed not just the loss of her husband but the complete destruction of her understanding of their life together. "I've lost not only Victor but my trust in my own judgment," she wrote. "Everything I believed about my marriage was a carefully constructed fiction." Caroline Barrett filed for divorce shortly after Noah's conviction. She moved to Portland, Oregon, where she works as a graphic designer and participates in HIV awareness and education programs. In a rare interview 3 years after the events, she expressed profound regret for her role in the tragedy. "I lied to protect myself, and those lies spiraled into something unimaginable," she stated. "I have to live knowing my deceptions contributed to someone's death, regardless of what Victor did or didn't do." Prism Technologies eventually folded, unable to recover from the scandal and the loss of key leadership. The intellectual property Noah had been developing was acquired by a larger tech firm, though his name was scrubbed from all patents and documentation. Investigators never definitively determined who had infected whom in the relationship between Victor and Caroline. Medical experts noted that without specific genetic testing of the virus at the time of diagnosis, tests that hadn't been performed, it would remain impossible to establish the direction of transmission with certainty. This ambiguity underscored what many observers considered the central tragedy of the case: multiple lives destroyed by secrets that could have been managed through honesty and appropriate medical care. Note to viewers: the following is a speculative reconstruction based on forensic evidence. While the investigation team believes this scenario aligns with available evidence, the exact sequence of events cannot be known with certainty. According to the King County Forensic Team, the events of March 12, 2019 likely unfolded as follows. Noah Barrett arranged to meet Victor Kendall in the Prism Technologies parking garage after most employees had left for the day. Cell phone records show Noah texted Victor at 5:15 p.m., suggesting they resolve things man to man rather than involving company leadership or legal channels. Security footage shows Victor's Tesla entering the lower level of the parking structure at 6:22 p.m. Noah's SUV was already present, having arrived at 6:07 p.m. and parked in a camera blind spot identified by investigators as Section D4. Based on evidence and subsequent analysis, forensic technicians believe Noah approached Victor's vehicle, possibly engaging him in conversation through the driver's window. At some point, Victor likely exited his vehicle. The forensic team theorizes that the confrontation escalated quickly. Based on patterns later found in Noah's meticulously cleaned vehicle, they believe Noah retrieved a heavy object, presumably the missing vehicle jack, from his SUV and used it as a weapon. The attack appears to have been frenzied rather than calculated. After the attack, investigators believe Noah placed Victor's body in the trunk of his own SUV. Tire impression analysis shows Noah's vehicle then left the garage at 7:09 p.m., followed by a period where the car traveled to a remote area near Lake Sammamish. Cell tower data reveals Noah's phone remained in the secluded area for approximately 83 minutes. Forensic experts suggest this time was spent cleaning the interior of his vehicle and transferring Victor's body to the trunk of Victor's Tesla. Noah then drove both vehicles to SeaTac Airport, parking Victor's Tesla in the far corner of long-term parking. Security cameras show a figure matching Noah's height and build exiting the Tesla at 9:17 p.m. and walking toward the terminal shuttle area, but then veering off toward the hourly parking section where his own vehicle was likely waiting. The meticulous nature of the cleanup suggests Noah had not planned the murder in advance, but had the presence of mind afterward to attempt to conceal his actions. Industrial cleaning products later found in his garage matched residue detected in his vehicle, despite attempts to remove all traces. Noah returned home by 11:02 p.m. according to home security system logs. Caroline later reported he immediately showered and placed his clothes directly into the washing machine, explaining he had spilled coffee all over himself at the office. In the following days, Noah went to work as usual, even participating in emergency management meetings about Victor's unexplained absence. Colleagues later described his behavior as appropriately concerned but not overly anxious, noting he volunteered to take over several of Victor's pending projects until his return. When Victor's body was discovered, Noah expressed shock along with other employees. He participated in a company waste candlelight vigil and was observed comforting Elaine Kendall at the memorial service. It was only when forensic evidence began pointing directly to him that Noah's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. Even then, investigators noted his continued attempts to manipulate the narrative, first denying any involvement, then claiming to have discovered Victor already injured, and finally suggesting temporary insanity driven by his wife's fabricated HIV infection story. The methodical efforts to conceal the crime ultimately became one of the strongest arguments against the defense's claim of a momentary unplanned act of passion. As Detective Washington noted in her final case report, the tragedy of the Kendall Barrett case lies not just in the loss of life, but in the cascade of deceptions that preceded it. Each lie, each hidden truth, added another unstable element to an already volatile situation. When that situation finally exploded, the resulting destruction left no one untouched. Today, the Prism Technologies building has been repurposed as a co-working space. The parking garage where Victor Kendall spent his final moments remains largely unchanged, though security cameras have been upgraded and coverage expanded, a silent acknowledgement of the tragedy that occurred there. Elaine Kendall has become an advocate for partner notification laws regarding HIV status, though medical ethicists remain divided on the complex privacy issues such legislation raises. She has also established a scholarship fund for technology students that emphasizes ethics alongside innovation. Noah Barrett continues to serve his sentence at Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. He declined all interview requests for this documentary. And in Portland, Caroline Barrett has legally returned to her maiden name and rarely speaks of the events that connected her to both men. When contacted during the production of this documentary, she provided only a brief written statement. There are no clean hands in this story, including my own. I hope others learn from our failures of honesty, respect, and responsibility. Sometimes the truth is painful, but the alternative can be devastatingly worse. For more interesting crime stories, check this out.